There's a new forum post that has just dropped on pathofexile.com from the devs saying Path of Exile 2 has been live for just over a week. We've addressed some feedback already and are working on more fixes for key pain points in an upcoming patch. The full patch notes are coming soon, but check out some of the more significant changes below. So it says gameplay features. Like we mentioned last week, we'll be adding the capacity to fast travel between checkpoints within an area, as well as adding many more checkpoints to areas, generally at all entrances and exits to areas, meaning if you find these first, you'll be able to instantly travel to them to continue exploring. Good change. We'll also be making passive point respecking cheaper, especially at high levels. It had a relatively aggressive curve getting more expensive with each character level. We have flattened that curve so it doesn't exponentially grow as much. This should generally result in approximately 40 to 50% less gold cost for respecking between the start and middle of endgame progression. Then we've got Trial of the Secumas. Players were finding Trial of the Secumas particularly frustrating in close range, so we've reworked how honour damage scales when in close range, as well as fixing an important bug that was causing players to take far too much honour damage from damage over time. Honour damage now scales down based on distance to enemies. When in close range, you'll take 35% less honour damage, tapering off as you are further away from monsters. Fixed a bug where damage over time was dealing thrice as much damage to honour as intended, and fixed a bug where honour resistance was only applying to 2/3 of that damage. This was confusing for us too. Skitter golems no longer use basic attacks and instead now just explode. Serpent Clan's burrow and ambush attack now has improved visual telegraphing and cannot be used from as far away. Volcanoes created by Rattle Cage's Fisher Slam now last half the duration. Then we've got endgame and monster balance. Generally, the balance in endgame maps was more punishing than intended, so we've toned down the damage in a number of ways and disabled a certain on-death effect where the telegraphing was not as clear as it should have been. Maps no longer have an additional elemental resistance penalties inherently applied at tier 6 and tier 11 or higher maps. It is now consistent across all of the endgame. Chaos damage now also scales less aggressively over the endgame. Critical strikes from monsters now deal 40% less bonus damage. Lowered the baseline monster density of breach encounters, primarily by reducing the frequency of the elite monsters appearing. Disabled the volatile crystals modifier. We'll revisit this in the future pending telegraphing movement improvements. Purple explosives created by the volatile plants modifier on rare monsters now deal significantly less damage. The Siphon's flask charges modifier on monsters now drains 10 times less flask charges per second. This was unintentionally draining way too many charges. These changes should generally result in an endgame that is much more survivable than before, and we will continue to address problematic cases as they arise. Then it says character and item balance. We've made charm modifiers on belts substantially more common and now appear at much lower levels. The Of Symbolism modifier now appears from level 23 onwards, and the Of Inscription modifier now appears from level 64 onwards. Electrocute is now 25% harder to build up, but the damage penalty has been removed from the support gem. Added a new lightning damage and electrocute cluster to the passive tree in between the ranger and monk sections. It is now more difficult to chain freeze enemies by reducing the amount of freeze build-up applied after a freeze has been applied. The Hunter's Talisman Notable now grants +1 charm slot. The small passive skills leading up to it now grant the stat it formerly gave. The Charm Helper text has been updated to indicate that you cannot have more than 3 charm slots unlocked, so that we can add more sources of it in the future. Then the final section is skill and support gem balance. Since launch, we've unfortunately had to nerf a few skills that were far too overpowered. How do we define overpowered? Basically, it's a situation in which a certain skill is so powerful that players feel no other method of playing the game is viable. Generally speaking, we are trying to do this in a way that doesn't make a build bad, but we can make mistakes. Ideally, any truly meta-shifting changes will only happen at the same time as a content patch with a new league to play in. But that doesn't mean we haven't been looking at underpowered skills and support gems. We've got a number of changes planned which should improve some of these skills. The full list of changes will be in the patch notes, but here is a sample of what you can expect. Improvements to Rolling Slam and all shield skills in the mace section. improvements to various bow skills, especially the skills used to generate frenzy charges, improvements to bone spells and chaos damage, overtime spells in the occult section, improvements to various crossbow skills, especially those at higher tiers, can't wait for that, Mercenary main, improvements to some of the underachieving quarterstaff abilities. And then alongside all of these skill gem improvements, we've also done a pass over the support gems. We've added 2 new supports and removed or lessened the penalties on many others, notably the fire, lightning and cold exposure supports. Added the Tremors support gem, which can be used to give up to multiple more aftershocks to skills with a damage penalty. Added the Bidding support gem, which can be used to give more damage to the command skills of supported minions. The fire exposure, lightning exposure, and cold exposure support gems no longer penalise damage of supported skills. They now have a mana cost multiplier of 120%. There are also some notable nerfs to a few of the remaining overachieving skills. Skeletal Arsonists' spirit costs now match the other 2 skeleton mages. This should result in a slight decrease in the number of Arsonists at a higher level. A nerf to the damage over time component on very high levels of Tornado and Vine Arrow. These were never intended to be dealing damage themselves, but more so act as a way for other skills to propagate damage. Magnetic Salvo can now only use your stuck lightning arrows as opposed to those created by your party members. As we wind down for the holiday season, we wanted to thank you all for our most successful launch so far. We could not have done it without all of your support. A lot of our team will begin to take some much needed rest over the next few weeks, but we look forward to getting back in the new year refreshed and ready for an exciting year of development in 2025. Happy holiday, Exiles. Feels good, good vibes. I like that they're updating us. The changes sound good. I'm sure Reddit will be happy with them. That looks like that monk the ice monk got a bit of a nerf in there, but we'll see how it plays out. Leave a comment. What are you playing? What classes are you enjoying? What skills are you running? What ascension are you going? What gear and build? Blah blah blah. How are you finding the game? And then finally, I made a game. It's called Battle Babes. It's on Steam. Play it if you want. The Steam sale's coming soon. Love you all. Hasta la vista. Peace.